Welcome to the Ending Sexploitation Podcast, where we decode sexual harm and provide you with active solutions. I'm your host, Kaylee McNamara.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ending Sexploitation Podcast. I'm Lisa Thompson. I'll be your host today. I'm Vice President for the Research Institute at the National Center on Sexual Exploitation. And I am so delighted to have with us our guest today, Kristen Jenson, who is the founder of an organization many of us know and love called Defending Young Minds. So say hello, Kristen.
Hey, Lisa. It's so good to be here with you. Always appreciate talking with you about such important topics and things going on today.
Well, thank you. So let me just tell our listeners a little bit about Defend Young Minds in case there's some folks out there who aren't familiar with the work that you've done. Defend Young Minds educates, it encourages, and it equips parents and professionals as well as community leaders to defend young minds from the harms of pornography. And truly, you and Defend Young Minds were like pioneers in this space, going before where there, used to be that there was just like this echo chamber. There was like almost nothing. It was this void. And you all were like stepped in, did this amazing pioneering work. And now we've seen the growth of a whole movement and really like an industry that's coming up around children to help protect them online. But you all were the pioneers in this space. You've done some amazing work. One of the things that I know we'll be talking about is your work on the best-selling book, Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, Porn Proofing Today's Young Kids, and then also the junior version of that. So I know we'll be talking about those. And you've also created a guidebook related to those two books to help counsel kids, help people who are using those books to know how to use them appropriately. So those are a couple of your, or three of your bigger accomplishments. So of course, you also have this fabulous. The word I was trying to get was fabulous. It is fascinating, but it's a fabulous website with all kinds of resources for parents who are trying to navigate this crazy world we live in which children have so much exposure to pornography and trying to prevent that from happening and then equipping them to be prepared when it does. So with that background, let's just go ahead and dive in to what we're going to be talking about today, and that is protecting children from the harms of pornography. And it's never been a bigger challenge. It's just overwhelming to so many people. And as you well know, Kristen, it's so accessible to children today. So now that, you are someone who's been on the front lines working with kids and parents for years. I thought I'd just ask you, how did you start? How did Defend Young Minds come about?
Well, I didn't ever have it in my plans. It was not a life goal to write a book for children, warning them about pornography. But I met a family, a mother, her oldest son was sexually molesting his younger brothers and sisters. And pornography was a big part of that. And so I woke up the next morning after hearing this really tragic story because it really impacted this family in a negative way. And I just thought there has to be a book, right? There has to be something to help parents talk, because I knew there was a problem out there of pornography addiction for adults. And I knew it was harming marriages, but I didn't know that it was like kids were getting into it. I just, I was clueless. And so this was a shock to me. And then to see how it had impacted this boy and how he had acted out on it. So I got up the next morning and I just kept having a persistent thought come to me about warning children about this problem. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go online. I'm going to go to Amazon. I'm going to go find the book. I will find a book and I will give it to this woman that she can warn her younger children. But I couldn't find the book. I couldn't find anything. And I thought, no way. give me a break. Like I've never had an original idea in my life. And you know how you have like an idea and then you go and you're like, oh, this is brand new. I'll invent this thing, and you go online and like 30 people have already done it. That's exactly what I thought was going to happen. I was going to go online. I was going to find a, several books that I could just buy for her and say, here's some help. But I couldn't find anything. And then I just had this crazy idea to write it myself because I started like finding other people's, like I found a video, a couple of videos, and I believe they were made by, um, maybe even the Reward Foundation,
Oh,
or
yeah. Mhm.
early on there was about they talked about the two brains, the primitive brain and the, they had different names for it, but the modern brain, the primitive brain, and they talked about how pornography affected the brain. And so I started doing some research, and I thought, you know what? You could boil this down for a kid. Like, I don't see why we couldn't boil this down so that a kid could understand it. Um, I happened to see, like I homeschooled for my kids for just a few years. I didn't do it the whole time, but I could see the kids are smart. And if you take the time to figure out how to explain a concept to them, then they'll understand it. And so that's the start of Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. I just started writing and had to have many, many, many iterations. And I had many people helping me, many brains to help my one brain. And yeah, it became number one bestseller on Amazon like overnight. And it has been number one in several categories ever since. And then I got asked to write a book for younger kids, which even shocked me, but there are moms out there and they're struggling. And I looked around and I saw every 3-year-old with a tablet, which we need to like be careful about those tablets.
Mm.
But so yeah, it was just a need that I saw. And to be honest, Lisa, I didn't think I was the person to do it. Like, who am I? I have a degree in English, I had a master's degree, but like it wasn't in this exact field. But I knew how to learn and I knew how to like evaluate research. And so I just started and I just want to encourage people out there that one person can make a difference and you just need to get started doing something. And it doesn't have to be probably going on too long here, but like
No.
there's a time in your life when you can do this. And this was the
Right.
time I could do it. My kids were launched. My last one went to college, and I could spend all my time doing this without it impacting, my family, without taking time away from them. And I have been doing this for the last, I don't know how many years, like what,
More than
13 or
10, right?
14
Yeah,
years?
right. It's been a while
Yeah.
now. So, well, that is such an inspiring story. And it's so, I mean, it has a tragic beginning, but it's wonderful how you took that tragedy and you turned it into something so impactful for other people. And what other thing that the other thing that really stands out to me about this wasn't even your own children that you were responding to here. Like you heard this story from a friend, from someone that you knew, and you took action based on somebody else's experience. So that's really incredibly inspiring. So thank you for
Well,
that.
that's what you guys are doing at Nicosi, I
Yeah,
think, in so many ways.
yeah,
You are
we
hearing
do.
these stories
Mm,
and you are working so hard to help people that you may not even know or meet. So I think there are a lot of people like me and you out there that see a need and just feel like this spark to do something about it. And there's lots of other problems that I've never felt called to solve.
uh-huh.
But this is one that I felt like this is part of the
You could
reason I'm
take
on
on.
the planet,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, we're so glad that that's what you feel called to do. And before we move on to talk about some other topics, let's just cover the books a minute. You
Yeah.
you said you mentioned we've talked about that there's the original Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, and that there's a junior version. Maybe you could explain the age ranges for the two books and then get
Sure.
into why it was necessary to have one for younger kids.
Yeah, so the junior book is for like 3 to 6, because if your child has any access to the internet, whether it's through a little paint program on the iPad or or goes to another kid's home and any access to the internet, you need to start a conversation with them. And this makes it super easy, super gentle, super even fun. So it helps you to get over that intimidation of broaching this kind of a topic with a young child. Um, I know some people are worried that you might like ruin their innocence, but they will be able to maintain their own innocence a lot better if they have a heads up. So that's the one. And then the original one really talks a lot about the thinking brain and the feeling brain and how addiction is developed, and how bad pictures can develop an addiction, can become an addiction. And so, unfortunately, young children are developing addictions to pornography. It's shocking, actually, how I was talking with a counselor at a conference a little while back, and she was talking about how she was counseling a 6-year-old
Mhm.
who was truly, in her estimation, addicted to using pornography. So we think, oh, well, they can't have this problem till after puberty. And that's not true, because pornography can kind of prematurely sexualize a child. So anyway, that book and the junior book accomplish 3 things. And that is, one, they give a definition. What is a bad picture? What is pornography? And we keep it simple, because a child's brain is not nuanced, right? A child's brain is black and white. It is literal, it is concrete. And so as they get older, you can do all the nuancing you want, but you're just not going to be able to nuance a 3-year-old or a 7-year-old's brain. So we use terms that they understand, which is good and bad. Um, and then, so we give it a definition, and then a warning. So here's why it's bad for you, why it can hurt your brain, how it can become an addiction, um, and some of the other harms, objectification and that. And then the third is we give them a plan. So they know exactly what to do when they encounter pornography, whether it's visual, whether it's in books, whether it's in music, whatever, that they have some control over how they respond to, um, to their environment, right? To their
Right,
environment,
right.
which unfortunately, like you said, there's so much access to pornography. So a definition, a warning, and a plan. And that's what are in both of these books in kind of very age appropriate ways.
Well, one of the things I've loved hearing you talk about in the past is the how Good Pictures, Bad Pictures is really focused on creating in children their own internal filter. So, in our work at Nicosi, we talk a lot about filters on devices and like there's all this work going on already across the country about age verification and making sure kids are a certain age before we can verify how old they are before they get on these pornography sites, or device level filtering, or app rating, the age ratings in app stores. Like there's all these things that advocates across the country are working on to try to create these barriers to act for children seeing this stuff. And that's all needed. Like we need all of
Yes.
it and more, right? But
Yes.
this is recognizing that at some point, those barriers are not going to work. They're not going to hold the line. There's going to be something that comes through. And what happens when that happens, right? So maybe you can talk more about that internal filter.
Yeah. Well, educators call it a disposition,
Mm.
right? Creating a disposition. And that means creating a mindset, a point of view, right? So you're trying to help your child see that pornography is not good for them. Pornography is
Mm.
bad for them. It's harmful for them. It's not going to lead to their happiness. Ultimately, the internal filter is the only filter that's going to work. Um, I think all of these other things are so important. We need the culture, right, to say this is not good for children. We need the culture to say that. We need the laws to say that. But if I'm a parent, um, I'm not going to be depending on all of that. I need to educate my child and help them develop a disposition so that they can make a choice, an informed choice, so that they have reasons to reject it, right? Not just that there's a fence there, right? Or a wall, but they have reasons. You know, all of these filters, which are very needed. We talk about them as well at Defend Young Minds, but none of them are going to do anything to affect the heart and soul of your child, right? And so it's the heart and soul and mind of your child that you're trying to educate and give and build that internal filter so that they want to reject pornography. They choose to reject pornography because they understand why, and they understand what it can do, and that they'll just be so much happier and be able to pursue all of their wonderful, fun, lovely goals in life without it.
You know that,
Without it.
and that's so true for, I think, for adults, for all of us. We like to know why, don't we? Like, some, you might get a rule, a random rule, or even in the workplace, somebody wants you to do XYZ thing, and you're like, well, why? Why is that important? Why do I need to spend time on this? Why do I need to do this? So why should I care? And even little kids, it's so helpful if we give them a why about how something is going to, ways in which something can hurt
Yeah.
them, ways in which this is, concerning, or it could hurt other people. And that helps increase people's motivation
Yeah.
to act, to make the right choices when we understand
Right.
why. Yeah.
And kids need to have a reason why, because they're going to get peer pressure.
Mm.
They're going to be pressured. I talked to one young man, and he said that when he was in the sixth grade, his friends were all looking at pornography, and they wanted him to look at pornography because they said if you aren't using pornography and doing the activity associated with it, that somehow it's bad for their body. They were going to get cancer, blah, blah. There's all these myths out there, right? And so, but he had decided that it would be unfair to his future wife.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is a kid that's kind of thinking ahead, right?
Wow.
Most kids aren't there. I agree. But he was thinking that someday he'd like to be married. And he thought about it. He said, would it really be fair to my wife if up until that time that we're married, I'm looking at all these other women and basically having sex with them over the pixels? Um, and he decided that no, that would not be fair. That would not be fair to her.
Wow.
And I think so he had an internal filter.
Mm-hmm.
He had it. Now, I will tell you that was something that he did well before my book was out,
Mm.
right? But I do believe that you can help children by having his parents had conversations with him, and it
Mm-hmm.
took. And so, can you 100% assure that everything you do for a child is going to completely 100% uh, keep them from ever looking and ever be, no, because they're going to have their choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
you can influence them, and you do influence them in so many other ways. You influence them whether, you want them to play a sport or whether you want them to play a musical instrument, right? All of that, all of your family values um, and traditions are influencing your child, hopefully for the better and for success. And so that's what I'm saying. You can influence your child um, and help them develop this internal filter. Another thing I call it is porn proofing. Now,
Mm.
maybe we could talk a little bit about what porn proofing means. Um, when you have, let's say you're going out for a walk or you're going hiking, but there's maybe a threat of rain, right? What are you going to do? You're going to pack a jacket, right? You're going to pack a raincoat. And when it starts to rain, you're okay, everybody get your raincoats on and your hoods on, or um I was going to say umbrellas, but I lived in Seattle for so long that we don't use umbrellas anymore. Forget, you never see
You
like
can
native
really tough it
Seattleites.
out. Yeah.
Yeah, they may have a hood, but there's only the tourists have umbrellas. Um, but you know, yes, so you give your kid the coat, right? The raincoat. You make sure they're wearing it, but can they take it off? Can they choose to? Yes. Um, if you're wearing a rain jacket, it means it's raining, right? It means the environment is producing all this rain. Yes, there's going to be pornography out there. They're probably going to see it. Yes, but that doesn't mean they have to like keep like inhaling it and bringing it into their mind. They can form a barrier. They can porn proof themselves if you teach them and give them the disposition, that internal filter. Um, so that's what I mean by porn proofing, is to basically educate that child, give them that option so that they can protect themselves, they can defend themselves, and they have a reason why and a way, and they understand a plan.
Right.
Um,
So this leads me to think about some of the ways in which children will encounter or are very likely to encounter pornography, why it's so important to do this work of porn proofing. Because as we know, there's the environment in which we live in, number one, just in general, is a pornified culture, right? We've had
yeah.
pornography widely available for decades, and it saturates the culture in, just more and more and more, the sexualization, the hypersexualization of culture.
Mhm.
But then you have these devices, which now we all carry around in our back pockets, and which, parents give to their children without so much as a second thought. And there's so much accessibility to extremely hardcore material of all kinds that are beyond our imagining, that children can easily stumble on, and in ways that we never even would dream. Like just this week at the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, we were sending out an email to our members about how pornography is available on one of the major music apps that's out there, that Spotify, the one that everybody
Yep.
thinks, oh, music, go listen, Spotify, that there's actually pornography on Spotify. Like, what? Like, for most people, that's just almost incomprehensible. But that,
Yeah. Yeah.
children can
No.
stumble on it on the most innocent ways, or going on these gaming platforms, which parents would automatically think are safe platforms for children to go on to. They would think that, oh yeah, it's for kids, it must be safe. Not really. That's not how
No.
what these developers prioritize at all. So
Mm-mm.
there's a myriad of ways, whether it's on devices or through other kids, that children get exposed. So maybe you could talk a little bit about what you've seen and the ways that
Yeah.
children get exposed.
Yeah. On Defend Young Minds, we have several articles about these music uh, platforms,
Apps.
Spotify and other streaming. And that's the thing, like we've all gone to streaming. So then we all depend upon this place that we go to get music. And you're right. There's pornography there. And there's also pornographic podcasts that kids can listen to. So they can find it in games. Yeah, see, we have this old tape that we're playing in our minds, that, and it may be from very early on, maybe from a leftover from the 80s, where, okay, we make all the playgrounds safe for kids. Like when I was growing up, playgrounds were like death traps, but they're safe when my kids were growing up. And so, and thinking, okay, wherever kids play, like in the physical world, it is super safe, right? Down to the point that there's like rubber chips on the ground so that if they fall from, 3 feet above, they're going to not have a soft landing. Well, we think that that also applies to the virtual play spaces. And that's where the disconnect is. It's
Mm.
not. They are, like you said, they are not designed with safety in mind, even if they know that they're attracting children. Like that is not their number one goal. Um, and so it's to make money. I mean, that is just it. It's to make money. And so they haven't prioritized. Whereas a playground is, a municipality has built the playground, a school has built the playground. They're not looking to make money on the playground, right? But in the virtual playgrounds, it is a money-making thing. So you've got to look at it differently. You
Mm.
cannot look at a virtual playground like you do a physical playground, right? So
Wow.
that's I think that's where all of us have a little bit of a disconnect. We're playing an old tape in our minds. Um, so kids can't get exposed. Music, library apps, um, all the games, I have grandchildren now, young grandchildren, and I'm always like talking to their parents like, are you careful about this? Are you careful about that? Because I hear the stories. Um, I wish the play spaces where our children play online were as safe as the physical ones, and they aren't. And so I don't know. The answer is to some of these things because honestly, there's no safe way to be on Spotify. There's no safe way to be on any of these music stores. We have some suggestions, but I'm telling you, it's difficult. Like we haven't found a filter that can filter any of that out.
Wow.
Um, and we've asked all the major, so I think that that's an issue. So, you know, we are following these things just like Nikosi, and so I would just invite everyone to come and um, join us at Defend Young Minds, and follow us on Instagram and Facebook and X
And
and
sign up
and
for
and
your
see.
emails. I get your
Oh
emails.
yes.
They're so good. Love your
Yes, we
emails.
really, I'll tell you, um, we we provide so much um, content to help parents, and it's all funded from the book sales. So if you purchased a book or if you purchase a book, thank you. You are supporting Defend Young Minds and all of our outreach to parents, which is completely, it's free. There, we put out our articles for free. You don't have to be um, a monthly member of
Mhm.
anything. So, but yeah, I think that kids can see, and I just want to, I'll put a little, I think you have to kind of start thinking about how you use technology. I think you don't need to go and become a Luddite, you don't need to go and become like no technology. But I would say something that Andrea Davis of Better Screen Time says, and that's slow technology. Slow tech. Let's slow down. Let's not be the earliest adopters of every last little bleeding edge technology. Let's slow things down and make sure our kids are having a play-based childhood instead of a phone-based childhood, as per um, the anxious
Yeah,
generation,
Jonathan Haidt's book.
Jonathan.
Hmm.
Yes. Um, I think that that's so important. There, at some point, yes, we want to give them the internal filter, but we also want to, as part of that, you know, think about how we use technology in our families and,
Well,
model healthy
yeah,
tech habits.
there are some of us who are old enough to remember childhoods that were pretty tech free, right? Some of us that weren't around when all the computers hadn't really become part of the home life. We didn't have, I mean, like when I was growing up is when the PCs first started even coming into the home. So I have years of memory of time where there was no computer in the home. There was no, there were no cell phones. There was no streaming of anything.
Well, yeah, Lisa, it's not even the computer.
Mm-hmm.
As Jonathan Haidt shows, it's not even the internet. Like my kids grew up with the internet and
Mm-hmm.
with computers in the home. My husband's software developer, worked for Microsoft. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we had the latest, greatest, but it was different. It was
Mm.
different because it, w like the games they played, we had to install on the computer, right?
Yeah.
They weren't playing with everybody else.
The interactive
We,
nature.
yes, they could even kind of play together. We had one computer at the top of the stairs and one computer downstairs, and they would both get on at my daughter's, and they would be talking to each other about playing this game, yelling up and down the stairs. But it's, it's different. You can't really play that way anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's different now because you're playing with everybody in the known world that can get on there. And,
Oh,
the
yeah.
FBI had a report. Oh man, it's probably been out for 2 years now, but it was a technique that people use. They get on there, they pretend that they're kids, they identify a kid to be their victim, and they befriend him, and then they start trading nudes, and to get this kid to, it normalizes it. He wants to be their friend. They seem okay with it, so then they get him to start doing those things. They take the conversation
Right.
offline to another, not offline, but to another platform.
Like a secured messaging app.
And then, yes, and then they can start exploiting him, not only for pictures, but also older
Money.
kids
Yeah.
for money. And then we also know the horrendous result of that. So,
Yeah. Well, I think what you're alluding to is the potential for suicide.
yeah,
There's been a big rash of particularly young boys, committing suicide as a result of sexual extortion cases, which is just what you were explaining, how
yes,
individuals groom them online and then extort them for images, and they become so overwhelmed and terrified that they take their own lives. This has happened to dozens of young boys in particular that we're aware of. So huge problem. Well, so there's just so much that has been opened up because of technology, and just a different kind of danger. Like, I guess in our growing up years, it might have been more stranger danger in the plague, in the real world environment. Now it's there is still stranger danger, but it's from an online environment where these people do use these platforms to groom children to gain access to them. And like, we would never open up our front doors and say, "Oh, come into the whole world," right? Anybody can come in and play with my child. But that's what so many of these apps make possible. But we're kind of shifting off from the pornography discussion, which I want to be sure we thoroughly flesh out here. So one of the things that you mentioned, that was kind of an unintended.
it's okay.
That was, yeah.
This is
No
the
pun
problem.
intended.
This is the problem. Let me tell you, Lisa, we all have to be so careful how we say things to avoid those very things.
Yeah,
Like,
no pun was
honestly,
intended there.
I
Yeah.
get it.
Anyway, when you first were talking about how the story that got you into this work, that's what we would call an instance of child on child harmful sexual behavior. So another child, usually it's an older child, has learned about sex, has seen something maybe in pornography or on television, and they start acting out these behaviors on other children. And
Mhm.
that's exactly, and what's really one of the things that I think that's just so heart-wrenching is when it's children doing this to their own siblings. So
Yeah.
this intrafamilial sexual abuse that can occur. And this has become the child-on-child harmful sexual behavior, whether it's intrafamilial or not, has just become a staggering problem. And in fact, what we know from the limited data that's available on this topic in the US is that in American schools, the children are more likely to be sexually assaulted by another student, by a peer, perhaps a slightly older, someone who's a little older or someone their age, is more likely to happen from another child than it is from an adult in those, whether it be a coach, a teacher, someone in their environment. This is astonishing, astounding, horrifying, and I think should be of grave concern to everyone that children are perpetrating very harmful, in some instances, sexual behavior on others. Now, there's a range of behaviors, right, about what's age-appropriate sexual behavior. But when you have things occurring where it's an older child that's, has power over these younger children and is engaging in things, that are way inappropriate for little kids, we have a big problem on our hands. So maybe you could speak more about some of the impacts of pornography on children, whether you want to talk about child on child or maybe other harms of pornography exposure to children.
There are so many harms to children. Child on child is something that has become, I think more and more people are seeing how this is happening. I talked to, so I was at an early childhood education conference not too long ago and talked to them, was teaching about, Good Pictures, Bad Pictures Junior, and also presenting this play guide that you can get as a free download with the book. And, I had one of the teachers come up before my second class, and she told me, she says, I was shocked when I saw that you were going to be speaking here because I didn't think it was needed. And then she heard the story of a 3-year-old, and this must have been someone close to her, that they had found the 3-year-old was taking a device, somehow had access to a device, and was taking video of herself naked. And they were like, what? But then they found that she was actually taking video of herself trying to have sex with the family pet. And they looked and looked and looked. They thought, oh, she must have a hands-on perpetrator. Got the police involved, law enforcement, I think even the FBI. I don't know. They were searching, who could be doing this? It was porn. Porn was the perpetrator. That is what's happening. Porn is perpetrating on children, and then they are perpetrating on other children. This is well known among the people that deal with this kind of thing. I went to a conference, and in fact, you were there with me. You and Dawn were there with me in Oklahoma years ago, and it was about this whole, children that, are harming other children. And there was a book that somebody had written that was going to be kind of like to help therapists talk to children that had offended on other children. And but in the book, the premise, the thing that initiated this child to start acting out on, I think in the book it was like a cousin, to start acting out on this other younger child was pornography. He saw pornography and he started acting. He did not have a hands-on perpetrator. Another story we came across years ago, a woman who contacted us and said that she had, as a child, she had been shown pornography by a neighbor, and then she had just, they're wired to imitate. They're wired to imitate. Their brain is wired to imitate. And so she had started doing this on cousins when she got together with cousins. And when she was found out, they grilled her, like, who is doing this to you? And she said they never thought to ask about pornography because they just assumed it was, hands-on perpetrator. Mm-hmm. Today, I am absolutely positive that what is driving children to act out sexually on each other is, by and large, it's more porn than a hands-on perpetrator.
Right. Yeah.
Very, very like it's a very strong teacher in a sense. It's a very powerful teacher. It affects the mind so powerfully.
Right.
So
I mean, we've
yeah.
all seen instances where children they'll see something on television, maybe a cartoon or whatever, and then they begin to emulate, act out that very scenario, right? And
Yep.
how many of us didn't grow up and go to school and then start playing teacher at home, right? Playing school, and somebody's the teacher and somebody's the kid, and we do those. That's how children learn. They're emulating, they're copying the
Yeah.
behaviors that they see depicted around them. So of course it's only logical that if they get exposed to this kind of material that they could very easily start trying to emulate it with other children.
Yeah.
That's just how children learn.
Yeah. And
Well,
so that's why it's so important to teach children from a young age what pornography is, why it's harmful, and what to do when they see it. And
mm,
not just one conversation, but conversations over and over again, because you're not only going to help them avoid addiction, you're going to help them avoid these instances of becoming that perpetrator. I mean, honestly, and it's both boys and girls that do this. And I think that, you know, if you have a child that has been sexually abused, that is horrible. But let me tell you, you have help. There's help. If you have a child that's the perpetrator, that
mm.
is the offender, that is doing this, you know, we have a lot of help for those parents on our website, Defend Young Minds. But depending on the state you live in, you may not have as much help as you would like. So keep, in a sense, you're perpetrator proofing your children when you teach them
Mm.
about pornography.
Wow, that's
And
so
then the other
important.
thing that you're doing, yeah, the other thing that you're doing is you are keeping them safer from hands-on perpetrator because what do they use? They use pornography to desensitize your child, to normalize all kinds of sexual acts, to teach them what to do. And so that is the number one grooming tool of perpetrators and it could be a family member. So it's not usually a stranger. It's usually someone the child knows, has come to trust. And so again, if you teach them, no one should ever show you a bad picture like this. No one should ever show you a naked picture of people. Um, it is it is important for you to tell me for your safety if someone ever tries to do that, you're not going to get into trouble. And these are all the messages that are in Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, and in the really great tips for parents and caregivers that are in the back of these books, and also on our website, Defend Young Minds. So there's so
Well,
many ways you can protect your children and
mm.
give them digital defense skills when you stop and teach them to reject pornography.
Well, I'm so glad you mentioned that it's not a one and done kind of scenario. You don't just read the book and then put it on a shelf and that's it. Has to be repeated.
Yep.
You have to reinforce it and make this an ongoing part of their childhood development, right? Like,
Right, just like anything else, right? You don't just have one conversation about honesty or one conversation about kindness,
mhm.
right? You're constantly reinforcing, don't hit your brother. It's not nice, you know. This is what we hear with our two
Ah.
grandsons. Um, but it's a constant everyday thing, and I think that we have to be on guard and we have to teach our children consistently these messages because porn is not going away anytime soon, and they need to be given an internal filter so that they know exactly what they're doing and why they're doing it.
Well, and before we wrap up today, you've mentioned a few times about how pornography can become addictive, how you talked about the brain, about the different brain I forget, you've actually said it at the beginning and now I'm blanking on the terms that you used, the two different brains that we
The
have.
thinking brain and the
Yes,
feeling
thank
brain.
you.
Mhm.
Thank you. It was like completely out of my head. So maybe you could speak a little, we could talk a little bit more about the harms of pornography to the brain and the impacts that it can have on, particularly on the younger the exposure happens, the more profound these impacts can be. So we really want to know what
Yes.
they are.
And you know that you know, because you've given me this research too, that that is true.
Mhm.
That the studies show that the younger the child is when they are exposed to pornography, if they continue looking at it, seeking it out, it's much bigger mental health impacts on that child as they go forward in life. I think one of the things that it does is it can interfere with their normal development. Um, and so when a child gets sexualized prematurely, especially by pornography, now they're seeing sex in a violent way. It's not within a committed, relationship like marriage. It is really commodified. The children see the objectification, and they start to objectify themselves. And so I think that I'm actually writing a book for girls, a good pictures, bad pictures for girls, and
Wow,
we're talking a lot about objectification in that book
that's
to
so
help
important.
girls, yeah, to not objectify their own bodies.
We're so excited for that to come out soon. But
Working on it, I'm working. But
yeah,
that's, yes, so important. So
the
I
other
think
thing,
that, yeah,
oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Kristen.
you were just saying about addiction, right?
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
it really does, any kind of an addiction is going to harm that child's ability to develop in a normal, healthy way. It's going to steal time away from doing other things that would help them develop normally, socially, um, developing skills, developing art. Um, and so there are so many downsides to the addiction piece, and it truly is an addiction. And
Right.
so that's so important that we understand that children can develop an addiction at an early age, and we teach them, and not just about pornography, right? Because good pictures, bad pictures teaches the children about the addictive process of their brains. And they love learning about this. And it empowers them not only to deal with, addictive gaming, addictive, other addictive behaviors, but also substances. So there's a wide variety of applications that you can use this thing, feeling brain, thinking brain model to help that child, because we live in a society that is awash in addiction of, whether it's fentanyl, alcohol, tobacco, um, or, you know, gambling,
Gambling. Yeah.
screen addictions, you know, pornography. Um,
Wow.
we need to teach our children, we need to addiction proof our children
That's
so that they can protect their minds,
such a
from all
great
of
point
this.
that there's really roll on way more positives from doing this that extend well beyond the pornography issue into the whole realm of other addictions
Yeah.
that we might cultivate over time. So wow, that's
Well,
fantastic.
Lisa, when I first started, I thought maybe I'll start with a book that's just about addiction proofing your child, right? Maybe
Hmm.
I'll just start there. And one of my friends that was helping me, she goes, "No, pornography is the thing. It's the thing that's the most, crucial." And when you look
Mm.
around, when you look at an 8-year-old, right? Is an 8-year-old, if unless they're in a situation where they're getting access to these substances really easily, but normally we have laws in place, right? So they're not going to be able to go and purchase cigarettes. They're not going to be able to go and purchase alcohol. We all know not to give alcohol to a kid, not to, all of this. They're kind of protected from
Hmm.
those kinds of things. The easiest thing a kid can get addicted to are screen addictions, including pornography. So it's so important to teach a child early on about their brain and how they can protect it from addiction.
Okay, that's great points. Well, before we wrap up, let's cover one more area. So let's say you're a mom or a dad who has just discovered that your child has been looking at pornography and maybe for a while and you didn't know about it. What now? Like, I'm sure there's parents out there who might be listening and this is it. They're panicked. That's maybe they've been scrambling on the internet to try to find resources and they've stumbled on this video. Like, what should parents who've had this come to this tragic realization, what do you advise them to do next?
Well, we have a plan for that. It's called the SMART plan. And we have a downloadable guide that is entitled My Kids Saw Porn. Now what? Right now what? Because it is often very shocking. And there's a lot of feelings of fear and guilt that a parent will go through. So my number one piece of advice is to stay calm. Get calm and stay calm, because you don't want to be transferring all those emotions on your kid. A friend of mine once called me just sobbing. I couldn't even understand her. So I'm like, I'll come over, right? So I went over to her house and knocked on the door, rang the doorbell. She didn't come. I opened the door. I heard her sobbing in her primary bathroom. And I went and found her. And I'm thinking, her husband's asked for a divorce. He's got a cancer diagnosis. Something else is horrible that's happened, whatever. And she told me that she had found porn on the 14-year-old's, the iPad the 14-year-old was using. And she was just absolutely, and her first instinct was to go to the school, pull him out. What are you doing? What am I? But she called me and I said, look, you need to calm down. You need to deal with your own emotions first. Then you can deal with this problem, right? So stay calm, get calm, talk it out. You have time. You can take a few days. You can take a week, right? Um, you can somehow lose the iPad in the meantime, but you don't have to confront the child until you deal with your own emotions first. And then the second step is M. So S, this is the SMART plan. M is for make a plan. So we have in this guide, we talk about like, here are the questions you want to ask your child, but not in like a rapid succession,
Grilling
like,
them
interrogation,
right.
right? We're not interrogating them with lights, and it's not like the police station, although I haven't myself been interrogated like that. I've seen videos. So we don't want to be that way, right? We just want to get it drip, 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 little by little, little by little. Here's a little conversation. Here's a little conversation. And it's not that you can't be firm and say, this is not going to happen. We don't, it's not that you can't be firm to have consequences. It's that they need to be well planned. And we also have good information about, like, in this guide about discipline. How do you discipline the digital age? Just take away their device? What do you do, right? So we have answers for that. We have lots of answers from therapists. So we have this whole SMART plan. I think those two first steps are really critical. We have 3 more steps in this guide to help you, and so many other, like, do you get them to tell you what they've seen? Do you, a lot of questions that parents have that we obviously don't have time to go over here, but check out that downloadable guide. You will get great advice from experts and professionals that have dealt with children and trauma. And also, if you are a counselor or therapist, or your child is going to therapy, think about the book that we have, which is the guidebook for counseling kids. This is a guidebook for counseling kids, therapeutic interventions to address pornography issues using artistic, didactic, and kinesthetic applications. That sounds very, very therapist speak,
Very formal, yes.
but they are, interventions, activities that can be done with these kids to help them along
Wow.
and in their trauma. Because what we're finding, and what many counselors will tell you, is that a child that has been exposed to a lot of pornography, and especially the violent, really degrading kind, is traumatized
Mm.
in the same way, in a similar way, as a child that has had a hands-on perpetrator. And so we are working to get these kinds of resources out to therapists to help parents. But if a parent wants to use this, they can use it as well.
Great. Well, Kristen, this has been a terrific conversation. You've given us so much to think about, and you've really done so much to equip parents and families to deal with this terrible, it's more than a blight. It's a, I don't know what the right word is, but this crisis that has impacted our country and really stolen the innocence of millions of children, done irreparable harm in some cases, travesties to these children. And so I'm just so grateful that we have someone like you who is helping us to stop this and to make sure that we're doing everything we can to protect children and that they can help protect themselves. So thank you for what you're doing. We're so grateful. Thank you for joining us on the podcast. And we recommend everybody come check out Defend Young Minds and see all the great resources, and definitely get the books, Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. So any closing comments that you want to make before we wrap up?
I just want to say, parents, you can do this. Professionals, you can do this. We can make a difference. We're not going to just fall on the ground, belly up, and say it's too big of a problem. Okay? We're not. We are not. We're going to fight,
Right.
and we're going to influence, and we're going to prepare our children. And we are just trying to provide some tools to make that easy and comfortable and doable. So yeah, come and join us, on our social media channels as well. We put a lot of great content out there. And again, it's just our gift to the world to help, to make a difference. And it's all funded by our books. But truly, we just want to make an impact for parents and for kids.
Well, you're undoubtedly succeeding in that. So thank you so much.
I want to see my own grandchildren grow up without being harmed by pornography. And it's something that, we take very serious, just in our own family, trying to do this. And so I understand, and honestly, on a more visceral level than I did even when I wrote the books.
Wow.
Because now I have these grandchildren, and I'm like, my mama bear has come out. My mama bear has come out. And so we can do something. We can do something. And we can help our children.
That's right. We can do it.
Approach.
Right? Like Rosie the Riveter. We can do it. Right. Let's go. Let's go, everybody. Let's go do it. Thanks so much. Take care.
You, Lisa.
Thanks for listening, everyone. And until next time, we'll catch you on the next episode of the Ending Sexploitation Podcast. Bye-bye, everyone.